Mark Watson, elitefts.com. I'm here at Showtime Strength and Performance in Newark, Ohio. Today we're going to go through a quick progression on some of the starts. Now, training a team in a large group sometimes poses some problems as far as getting the athletes in the proper position. So we're going to go over some falling start series, we're going to go over a lying or prone series, and then a kneeling series. And what we want to do is talk about not only some of the things you have to watch out for, some of the mistakes that I've made in the past, and some of the things that maybe warrant that these drills aren't maybe the best for your situation. So some of the things to watch out for, and maybe a couple coaching cues that will allow you to progress and regress your athletes. So again, these will be for a team setting. These are going to be for non-track athletes, and we'll really be a progression how to go through all these drills. Okay, so the first series we're going to go through is a falling start series, and there's a couple different drills and regressions that we have with this. Hunter's going to demonstrate a couple things. So the benefit of a falling start is to have the athlete in a forward position where it's going to simulate where they're going to be needing to be body position wise when they sprint forward. So for young athletes, it's pretty good. One of the disadvantages are if you're trying to do this in a competitive type environment, all athletes are going to be sprinting at different speeds. So even if you start them to lean at one time, doesn't mean that they're going to be able to produce force at the same time in that leaning position. So that's one thing to work out for. So there's one thing that we're going to look at is first falling start will be just having the athlete. There's two ways to do this. One will be a falling start where the athlete is just standing straight, and now again when they lean forward, they're going to have a little bit of that dorsiflexion in the ankle. Now that's not really a familiar position with athletes, because again they're not going to be flat-footed on their first step. So another way you can do it is have the athletes all go ahead up on the toes, and then they can go through and do their forward lean and go and sprint out. One of the things that we're worried about when you do a falling start is where that first step lands. The biggest mistake that you have to look for as a coach in a large environment, and Hunter's going to demonstrate this, go up on the toes, and the biggest thing is when they step out and they slow themselves down with the first step. So he's going to go ahead and come through and then stop and stay right there. Now, if you look at that shin angle, if he's trying to catch himself from falling, that shin angle is straight up and down, and obviously this is not a very good position to be in if I'm going to produce force, because again, that shin angle is going to dictate me producing force straight up. So what I did on the first step of this drill is just slow myself down. So it really is going to be important, go back up, it's really going to be important to have the athlete when they come through is to make sure that the first thing they're thinking about is driving their knee. And I know that's something you don't coach when you normally sprint. So when you're coaching the athlete to drive their knee forward so they can produce force back into the ground, that might be an extra step that you might not have to work on or have time to work on. So really be cautious that you might be actually inhibiting the sprint. One other way you can do that is have the athlete do a knee hug. So if they do a knee hug, so with a knee hug, same thing, make sure dorsiflex, make sure that ankle is close to that knee. Now when I lean forward, I'm just going to brace lock in. He's leaning forward. Now he can go ahead and strike that foot down into the ground when he sprints. One thing to watch out for with this is that sometimes if that knee is hugged up, if they have good good hip flexibility, and they can really get that knee up high, that's going to be an angle they're never really going to get into. So what we try to do is have the athlete have it a little bit lower, right? So again, their arms are straight as they're hugging their knee. Now when they come forward, you can go ahead and just do his first step. Now they're going to go ahead and lean forward and then push off and go and sprint through. You can also make sure the athlete's on their toe as they do that. Now you have a little bit of balance and proprioception component to that as well. So again, if you're going to do the knee hug, make sure that the athlete doesn't stomp the ground and doesn't push off. That's another thing that happens too. And when they do hug, make sure it's a little bit lower. The last phase of this would be to just have the athletes be able to lean forward. Have an athlete here, so they're going to lean forward, right? And then as on one count, they can be up on their toes, and I can just let go. And once I let go, now they're just going to have to ready 1, 2, 3. They have to let go and sprint, right? So that's another. Now they're already in that position. Now again, you can have all the athletes sprint at the same time. You can see them because as a coach, you can see every single athlete. You can even waterfall them, so you can see every athlete's first step if you're in a large group. You can also do that same variation with the knee hug component as well. So That's another good one to do. You can even have them do the first couple steps, so they can actually get in a position where they're doing their wall drill type sequence while they're leaning forward, and then sprint out. So that's something you can do. Last phase of this, so we have straight leg falling start, knee hug falling start, and then basically an assisted falling start. The last one would be kind of a jump back start, so it gives you a little bit more of a plyometric kind of effect. So again, what we're trying to do is by jumping forward the line and then jumping back, we should be able to be in that same angle to go and sprint out. So Hunter's just going to demonstrate one quick thing. So again, one jump forward, one jump back, and then he'll sprint through. Does that make sense? So again, what they'll do is we'll do it one more time. So when he jumps through, jumps forward, jumps back, as soon as he jumps back, he should be pushing off just like he's doing a falling start. Ready? Right? Boom, push off. Right? So with that component, make sure when they push off both feet, they're really going to drive that leg forward and really going to look at that second step. So they push off of both feet. Where's that second step landing? And are they producing force on the second step as well? So that's kind of a little bit of a progression with the falling starts. Okay, the second phase of this will be a prone start, or what we call a push-up start. Now, there's some things that are really good about this, and others that are, that may need some extra coaching and maybe not get your athletes in the best position. So we'll talk about that. So the easiest thing to do is have your athletes in a prone position and have them scramble up. And I'm not going to have them demonstrate, but have them scramble up and just go. This is maybe not for a mechanical advantage to reinforce good habits, but more of a competitive advantage. Again, there's a lot of sports that athletes have to be from the ground to a sprint position as quick as possible. Different skill set. It may not be a linear speed skill, maybe just being a quickness and athleticism and a way for athletes to compete. You can also do the same thing when they're lying on their backs, and same thing, hands to the side, when they're rolling one way or the other, which is another good competitive component. Just make sure all the athletes are rolling the same way. Those aren't necessarily speed development drills. Those may be more competitive and athleticism type drills. Maybe not to build athleticism, but to display it for your athletes. So one thing we'll look at is when we do a push-up position, here's the problem, right? So if I'm just going to go up in a push-up position, right? And so the next phase, when you tell the athlete to sprint, they bring their leg up. Right? When they bring their leg up, remember that this angle is just not very conducive to produce a lot of force. That shin angle is very close to parallel with the ground. And it's not just, it won't reinforce good habits, and they're just really pushing off the ends of his toes, which you know you're not going to produce a lot of force. And the athletes, yes, I got the athlete in a good position where they're going to be able to drive out instead of up, but it's really not developing any good habits. So go ahead, straighten your leg back up. What we started to do was started doing a back push-up position or just inchworm a couple steps up. Now, I might not be at a 90, but that's going to depend on your athlete. I still have my shoulder blades retracted. Now, when I bring my leg up, now I'm a little bit better angle, right? It's almost, again, I can't use the back leg because obviously it's straight, so I'm still reinforcing good habits on that front leg. So it's not a sprinter start, but it's a little bit better and more realistic than a traditional push-up start. So that's one way we'll do it. So the progression will be this. You can even have the athlete say, okay, ready, they get up in their up position, set, where they bring their leg up, so they're able to push off it, and then you can say go from there. The next set would be, I'll go ahead, I'll say ready, he's up in a push-up position, I'll say just go, and then he'll have to bring his leg up and sprint. The other thing you could do is have that athlete even get this back leg up, almost like a single leg RDL, where it's straight, and now, when I say ready, set, now I have to swing that leg through and plant off it. That'll be good. Go ahead, do that and sprint through. Right, swing it through, plant, go. Right, a little bit maybe more realistic depending on where their foot contacts and how far they bring their knee, but it may be a little bit more realistic as how that foot plants on the ground. So it gives them a little bit of variety. So again, they can practice using swinging that leg through, planting and pushing off. Because again, in sprinting, that ability to relax and then produce force again is going to be very important. It's a skill that, especially for young athletes, you can kind of reinforce. So that's really progression. Scramble starts or, lying on my back starts, really good for competitive athleticism, but when you're going through the push-up starts, try to get that butt up a little bit so they're more of an inchworm type start, so that way their shin angle is going to be a little bit more realistic, where they have their foot's already planted, they have to bring their foot up and plant, or they have to swing their foot all the way through. It's kind of three different phases with that, with the push-up starts. So the next phase of the progression will be a lateral start series. Now, we've done a more extensive video on just the lateral starts and progressions to that, so I don't want to go over that in too much detail, but basically we're talking about when the athlete's in a good athletic stance, to be able to make sure that the athlete can shift his weight to that front leg before he does that crossover step and drives that left knee. And again, it's the difference between pulling with that front leg and being able to shift so you can push off that front leg. So we're not going to really demonstrate that, but again, check out that video for how we do those lateral starts. Very good for, again, sport specificity and really for developing rotational power as well too. So make sure anytime you're dealing with athletes, you have as many lateral starts as you do linear starts. But the next phase of that progression would be to be able to get down to the kneeling start. And again, this is just for some variety. It's not going to be the same biomechanically as a traditional lateral start because you're not pushing off that front leg. But what it is going to do is reinforce good habits of really pushing hard off the back leg and still reinforcing the shoulders getting turned, getting your head turned. Remember, if you've got your head, your athletes cannot run very fast looking sideways. Get their head around to the direction you're going to run first, and really making sure that he's not popping up. So really with these, it's just going to take one step with this. But really from this one, you say ready to go. He's pushing off that back leg, ready to go, and again, he's pushing off and sprint. Okay? So again, you see that. You can do that with a lot of athletes. You can see the height, you can see their first step where that stands. Biggest thing with that is making sure that the athlete doesn't take such a big step with that first leg that they literally have that positive shin angle when they're slowing themselves down. The next one is going to be a basic RDL start. So a single leg RDL was something we had in our training program, which is very efficient. Nick Showman and I did a video on it. Really took double the stress on the glutes and hamstrings, half the stress on the low back. It's a unilateral exercise. It's just single leg RDL is probably one of the most underused that we've seen. So these cues are already familiar to our athletes. So again, one thing we just try to do is have a slight bend in that knee, and I'm reaching with the right leg and reaching with the right arm. I'm just going to be down in that one single leg position. Now from here, I'm going to go ahead and I'm in a low position, make sure he's not popping up. I'll push off hard and take one step and sprint, right? Making sure that, again, that athlete's going to get his body positioning around, so that first step is pointed in the direction he wants to sprint. If it's, remember, your second step will always follow where your toes are pointed. If my toes are not pointed straight ahead, it's hard for me to have my step straight ahead. If my toes are pointed off at an angle, my next step's going to be at the same angle. I'm not going to be able to cross over. So make sure that's the coaching point you're looking for. The other one, progression off that, is going to be a skater start. And again, this is more of a plyometric, for lack of better words. Really, sometimes hockey specific, but really one of the best plyometric exercises you can do to reinforce lateral speed and change of direction. So now what we have the athlete do is they'll get in that same single leg start, and they're going to take a jump, one skater jump to the direction I'm sprinting, a skater jump back, and a plant push up. So it's going to be more of a dynamic progression for the first one. So again, in an RDL position, and then Hunter's going to sprint out of this. So go off the arm, boom, turn back, and I'll push up. So what you can do is you can actually have it so the athlete sticks the landing every time, which is going to be very important for athletes to develop, because again, so you have some athletes that are so dependent on being elastic and bouncing that, again, that's a great way to reinforce that structure and control. Something we learned from Adam Fight is really just get in a position where they can't hold that and stick that landing. The other one would be, if I'm going to go ahead and just, Hunter, do me a favor, just do the same thing, but only just a shorter jump, and just as soon as you land, boom, pop and go. All right, ready, set, go, pop, pop, still going on. So again, you're really going to really hit that and really go. And really, you're not trying to get as much height. Hunter was trying to get a little more height, which is fine. You can even do that over a cone, which will reinforce. Again, now that landing is not going to be so in a direction where he's going to be landing in a downward position as well. So again, you can play around with that and just, again, making sure that that's going to be more of a slow response type plyometric drill as opposed to a rapid response. But again, really good because you got all that weight on that left leg and really good, a very specific strength type exercise to develop that lateral change of direction ability. The last thing we'll go over is a testing start series, or just a testing start. Now, the paradigm is that you don't want to spend a lot of time working on a skill that's not going to help the athlete for their sport. Again, a lot of times these testing starts might not have a lot to do with their sport at all. But you also want to have the athlete have some success if you test One of the reasons why we went to a different type of system. We'll talk about that later. But so if you have athletes that have never tested before, obviously you're going to try to transition them into a three-point stance. We've got to the point where we've had athletes just test out of a parallel start because that's what their sport was, or they just went to a two-point start, but a lot of times, again, they would false step. Whatever it may be, if you're going to take the time to teach them how to test and start, here's a couple things that might help. For an athlete that's never tested before, a really quick way we'll do is that Hunter is going to be right-handed, so his left foot is going to be forward, correct? So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and have his left foot step back from toe to heel, have his right foot step back toe to heel, and then make sure he's about shoulder width. So even if you have the athlete, Hunter doesn't have to do it, but sometimes just have him have one foot out and rotate, and that'll get him in the right stance. Obviously, bigger kids with their hip width, if they're not very flexible, they might have to be a little bit wider. But what you want to do is you want the athletes to figure this out themselves. So really, when we get into that position, and again, I'll have Hunter do one where he's just going to go ahead. How would you normally do it? And you'd be pretty close. So again, Hunter's, because of his tall, his arm length, he's going to go ahead and bring his back leg back a little bit more. Some coaches want their athletes to sprawl all the way out and climb back in, right? When they do it with their hands, that's going to be up to you. That's based on the preference of the athlete. But we're just going to give you a couple of things to look for. So first of all, obviously, we want the athlete to climb the line as much as possible. What you're looking for at the beginning is a couple of things. If you get up in that starting position, just stay there. Stay with two arms down. Eventually, he's going to get his left arm up, all right, and out of the way, if that's what he wants to do. If you have athletes that prefer both hands down, that's fine too. But what I'm really looking for is that angle. I'm looking for a good angle, again, close to 45 with that front leg, and I want that back angle is going to be more parallel, right, but still having a pretty good angle so I can produce force off of both feet. One thing we learned, you can go ahead and get down. One thing we learned is that, again, if you're going to have the athletes push force off of both feet, they're going to be able to produce more of a first step than they would if they're just having all that weight on that front leg. Also, the difference is just basically that front leg is going to stay on the ground a little bit longer, right? So again, when the athlete gets up in that position, and again, if you're going to have a timing system, if they're going off the movement, get them used to that. If you're going off of a sound, now you're measuring their reaction to that sound and their speed. So just be careful how you're testing. So again, the athlete's going to go ahead and sprint out. So a couple of things we're looking for with that. Go ahead, relax again. A couple of things we're looking for. So when you're looking for the athlete, if you're looking at really their third step, how far are they gaining ground on each additional step? The biggest issue is sometimes with that first step, if they're just clearing the line only by a couple inches, again, they're not generating enough force. You really have to reinforce how far they're stepping without coaching them. The biggest issue is sometimes the things that we want a good stride length, but again, as Buddy Moore said, those are a byproduct of the force you produce, of the speed. So again, don't coach how far they step, but make sure they're aware of they're not gaining enough ground on their steps. Some people say, again, the first 3 steps you should gain 5 yards, the second 5, first 3 steps, 5 yards. That second 5 yards of the 10-yard sprint should be into 2 steps. So in 5 steps, you should go 10 yards. Might be ambitious for some athletes, so again, but that's something to look for. So again, looking at eye level, as far as they should be looking forward, we used to talk about anywhere between 2 and 3 yards. Sometimes if they're looking straight down, their head's down, again, they're going to, sometimes if you force the head down, that'll keep their shoulders down. That's going to be the biggest thing with that is that's going to be your decision to make on the athlete. But a lot of times when they're looking straight down, that shortens their steps up. When they're looking straight up, they pop up. So really, their eyes should be down at least that first 10 yards. Again, you're not dealing with track athletes. Best thing to do with some of your athletes is have them run track if you have a pretty legitimate track coach. But if you don't have that option, again, getting to that testing stuff would be huge. And make sure they can play around with it. So make sure they can get the position. So again, Hunter's just going to go one time out. He's going to really produce force off of both feet and really push off. The only thing I would say with Hunter is I might want to get his hips a little closer. Bring that back leg up just a little bit, right? Just a little bit. Again, we want those hips above the shoulders. Right, for the most part, that's what we want, and we're going to go ahead and pop out. Ready? Go. So again, when you're looking at a couple things, so a couple things that we're going to do, and I'll just talk about this real quick. When you're testing, the biggest thing as a coach you can do is, I know that we want to use the stopwatch as our measuring stick, but there's a couple of things that might give you some better feedback. Number one, measuring where their first step is, their second and their third step gets to. Again, if I can gain a half an inch or an inch on every step I take, obviously you know that I'm going to be able to cover that ground in less time. So again, just having really making sure that you can either measure that third step, so giving some instant feedback. The other thing is filming those sprints. And I think nowadays with iPhone, you even have slow-mo on your iPhone, you can record that and have the athlete come back and show them, like, look at your third step, look at your first step, look at your shoulders pop up, look at you false step, whatever it may be. Sometimes too much we have coaches that stand around and yelling and come on and giving some random instructions and random motivation for speed drills or checking their own email on their phone. Instead, have those peripheral coaches film the athletes and give them some feedback. You'd be surprised, they could probably look at themselves and they'll know right when you don't even need to coach them. They'll know exactly what they did wrong. Your job as a coach is to make sure they know why they did it wrong and how to fix it. There's a difference in that. So really making sure you're measuring how far they're going those steps, filming those, and really instead of a stopwatch, maybe getting to a point where they can start to be in a position where they can race. I think that's the best thing we did as athletes, is get them competitive and have them race instead of measuring with the stopwatch, which can be, now you have inter-rater reliability issues. If you use electronic timers, you have some different issues with that. Again, if you have them race sometimes, now you can really, now you know who your fastest kids are. So we talk about that in a video that we did, a webinar we did about 5 ways to do more work in less time. So those are things to think about with the sprint. Hopefully those will help you to get your athletes in a better position to gain speed and to really have that speed and translate onto the field. So.